Hi, my name is Rohit, and today we are going to talk about transformation and cultural shift using site reliability engineering and data science. We'll cover the aspects of mostly around site reliability engineering. How is it as a transformation driver? How does it tackle culture, technology, and how we can use data science and leverage a lot of data ops and AI ops in the entire journey of doing the transformation using site reliability engineering. We are also going to talk about defining processes, the risk-taking abilities, the unique process which we try to bring in place, and at the end we are going to surely talk about the challenges which we faced based on our experience. To start off with, a lot of people have a question around what is an SRE. Yeah, it was obviously coined by Google. Ben Sloss coined this term. Site reliability engineers often have background in software engineering and system engineering, and then it was about making sure that you put in a person from a software development background into an ops and see how it works out. Site reliability engineering is not only about doing automation; it is about also looking at resilient system design, and things of that sort. Is it same as DevOps? Yes, more or less, but there is a major difference being that site reliability engineering is applied on something which is post production. Um, is SRE about automation? Automation is one of the key drivers, and we'll talk about it when we get to the principles which we talk about and how it is a cultural shift more than anything else. That is what we have experienced when we try to roll it out for a services based organization. And how do I measure the success? The measurement is no longer around SLAs. It's no longer around contracts. It's around improvement. You measure improvement, and that is what is SRE all about, right? So if we go to the transformation drivers, as I talked about, and I'm going to spend some time here in the four drivers which we perceive as the most important one for site reliability engineering. The first and foremost, and I cannot stress enough on it, is cultural shift. It is the most difficult thing to achieve when we go on this transformation drive, right? Um, it revolves around building better teams. It revolves around saying a lot of not my problem out of the window. It is about pushing people to a different level. It is about re-enhancing and reskilling them up to a point. It is about making sure you change the ways of working, right? uh, a cultural shift is about a lot to do around training, a lot to do around making sure that the normals, ways of doing work is going to change, because we are going to use a lot of technology, we are going to use a lot of data into it, and there will be example later in the presentation where we'll talk about how we try to challenge the current setup of the processes which were there in place, including the ITIL setup which we had. The other part is obviously technology refresh. Now, if we want site reliability engineering to be successful and we want the SREs to be really working in real areas, we need to have a certain degree of acceptance, certain degree of certain degree of freedom from an SRE standpoint. We also will talk about the concept of visibility engineering, also where it is about technology refresh. We'll talk about SRE's focus on doing tooling, making in-house tools or using different tools across. A little bit of shift towards open source tooling also is what we perceive. Then a lot to do about data visibility engineering. Now, uh, data analytics is not new. It's not something which is new. Uh, the entire world is obsessed, especially in the operations world. They're obsessed about ITIL data analytics. Okay, which is important. I don't deny that, but there is so much more we can do when we do analytics on top of components. We do analytics on top of toil dashboards, real time ones, usage of machine learning, and usage of data ops to get to things which is not visible to naked eye. And we'll talk about it where we look at doing predictions based on the components and then deriving outputs out of it and then enacting on top of it. Then the last part is the process and the automation. We'll again touch on that when we go to the reliability principles. But processes have to be measured. Processes sometimes have to be changed or at least foregone at times to bring simplicity into the setup. Sometimes structures become shackles when we put too many processes in place, and we'll try to look at how SREs can help in that. Quickly to the SRE reliability principles, and I will go through each one of them very quickly. And there are aspects which we have to keep in mind from an SRE standpoint. Embracing risk, the first one, and error budgeting. Now, embracing risk is a cultural thing. Uh, we do serve customers. We do have our contractual agreements, and we have to ensure that we are within that. But having said that, how do you manage risk? How do you bring in a culture of risk taking ability, right? You bring in a risk tolerance and tolerance level through SLOs. So that's what we try to achieve. It's a cultural thing. You have to trust the team to take a certain degree of risk, obviously not falling through the crack, but within the calculated risk framework which we have defined. Then you have the concept of error budgeting. Now, error budgeting is sometimes very much confused with people tend to confuse it with uh, all the SLAs and the KPIs. No, it's not. It's a KPI for themselves. Okay, it's a KPI to reach higher, to reach better. Okay, it's about disruption. It's about making sure that error budget violation is considered an equivalent violation of what we do for an SLA, even though the SLOs or the error budget will be much higher than what the SLAs are, right? Managing toil. This is an area which is primarily untapped, and that's why you need SREs to be inculcated into the team members. That concept, because toil necessarily cannot always be calculated in numbers. There are so many things that teams do outside what is captured and what can be analyzed, and we have to look at it and revisit it at different times to see how we can ensure that the SREs make sure that the operations teams the the uh, the workload is much lesser. Okay, SREs are no separate team. That is also a misconception. They are the operations team who ensure that most 50% of their time they are only working on making sure that they automate any mundane tasks, or ensure that the automation is going to the level where they are no longer required to sit on call and do stuff, right? Monitoring, for me, is the base of it. Now, there are traditional long-term monitoring tools which are there, but what we try to bring in over here, and that's where the data science comes into picture, is trying to make sure that we try to align this with more predictive stuff. Okay, a lot of log analysis will happen because the alerting system through the monitoring setup which we already have across infra or application is sometimes very reactive. By the time it gets to us, things have already happened, and we wanted to change that. So monitoring is what we call as advanced monitoring, and the concept of visibility engineering. Automation, well, is an output always. Probably the most overused word in the industry. Automation is always an output. Automation is after you know what you need to do, and then automation does what it does. So while automation is an output, analysis is much more important to understand what we need to automate. So we do give weightage to the automation, but it is what to automate is very important, and how the use cases are nurtured. Release engineering, this is more from a more advanced or more modern setups where we have the release engine train which can be run through from a DevOps practice. Traditional infrastructure teams are still a little bit behind in that, but when it comes to container based teams mostly, or public cloud based teams, release engineering concept, the principles work pretty well. A lot of automation goes in there, a lot of predictions also go in there. The simplicity is the core of it. It is again a cultural thing. You don't want to overcomplicate things. You don't want to get five different process stage gates to ensure that the things are all going through. You got to make simple solutions. We are not here to solve world hunger's problem in one day. Okay, so we go step by step. Again, on the same side, what all things we have done, how the SRE setup was done, and this brings me to the point where we want to talk about how the SRE penetration is so important in the organization. Now, in a product-based organization with a central team monitoring the entire architecture and the technology part of it, it's a little bit straightforward that we have a concept of having an SRE team and inculcating it in each and every team members. Now, in case of services-based organization, it gets slightly tricky, because we have each and every service, for each different customers. Now, each of these different customer units act and have their own revenue, own P&L, and they act in their different way, right? Now, the same services being done for two different units will have slight difference. Some might be, relatively new to this. Some might be quite advanced when it comes to tooling or SRE adoption or any of that. In order to do that, we defined a concept called as Bootstrap, Site Reliability Engineer, a group of 10 to 12 SREs whom mostly we hired from the market, who have done this in past. And they were dedicatedly assigned, who were like ideological mentor to the entire SRE community across the organization. We call them the horizontal SRE, and the vertical SRE was that we asked each and every teams, each and every squad for each and every customer unit whom we are working for, and we are a $5 billion company, so there are plenty. We wanted to ensure that there are SREs identified in each and every squad. Okay, people who are working in SRE. Ideally, we want everybody to be an SRE, but we are in. It's more of a maturity target than actual reality, right? So what we wanted to do was we wanted to keep SREs there in each and every squad. Obviously, we have to train them, and that's what was the part of the horizontal, the Bootstrap SREs. And Bootstrap SRE also would slowly induce the new tooling culture, the visibility engineering, where we have the usage of AI-driven intelligence and making sure that we work on predictions. We call it, ITSM data plus component data plus system data plus error budgeting, and coming back with a framework that we define error budget for each and every squad. And obviously, error budget cannot only be defined to cater to a certain number. It was defined keeping in mind what the customer wants, what the end user wants. That's when the SREs are the most effective ones, right? This was the visibility engineering architecture at a very quick level, if I can get through this, which was around trying to make sure we have a stream of data. We try to get it all into a DataOps setup. Okay, this is still a work in progress. We are still not 100% there. We have been able to do it for some of them. We are still, implementing for some of the logs part, because there are so many customers, so many toolings, so many different ways of doing GDPR laws apply, and you can't move everything to a centralized setup. But the point was, it was never to do a centralized setup. We are not here to make a data lake. What we are trying to do is we have an integration layer across, so that we have all the data ingesting in, which can be used, and then we have separate pipelines. For example, we have an ITIL based machine learning model, which gives runtime technology error categories, right? So for every customer, it's different, because their incident based thresholds are different. Their incident ways of working of the teams are different. So we have separate pipelines, ML pipelines, which run through and churn out their dashboards. But at the same time, there are prediction based setup also, which are there, and I'll show a little bit of that in the subsequent slide. And then based on that AI hub, we try to bring in new models and try to utilize the DataOps concept. That's basically what we have from a visibility engineering set standpoint. Now, this is a very cliche slide, to be very honest, because data is the new oil. Everybody knows that. So the first stage was obviously ITSM analysis. Everybody does that. We wanted to bring in a flavor of ML of what the problem is rather than where the problem is. In a traditional setup, we usually have a flood of incidents coming in and people trying to do a lot of analysis around it, by giving it in an Excel to our SMEs. We wanted to make sure that happens automatically. So we wrote a machine learning model which has different pipelines, obviously, for different customers, where the problem itself is shown based on the historic record, which is excellent. And the second thing was the ITSM. This was our starting point, the ITSM analysis. The next was we get into log analysis, where we are more talking about dynamic thresholds, because static thresholds are the ones which develop alerting. You put a configuration, the alerting happens, you get an alert or an incident or whatever. But the log analysis is more like a moving average concept, more like a dynamic threshold, and that's based on prediction. So we are not anymore waiting for when it will happen, okay, or when it happens, then I'll take an action. We are looking at predictions, and this was one of the most paradigm shifts which we wanted to do. Again, it's a work in progress. We have still not reached there. But the point was we wanted to get to a point where we can start predicting not only failures, failures is probably the first step, but looking at how it's going to affect business. So we do a lot of predictions on monitoring. Then we do a lot of correlation, which is based on dependent variables, non-dependent variables. I don't want to get more into details about mathematical part of it. Okay, but more to do with how we use these predictions to come out with an output. That was number one. But the number 2 point, which was very important, was how does it change? And it all brings down the data science part where we have predictions, the technology which we are using, the processes have to be implemented. And I'll give you two instances where the processes were differently implemented. Number one was, if we have a prediction setup, that means the static threshold based alerting, if we are very accurate with the prediction, will no more longer be applicable. But the point was, how does it change the ways of working of the team, which brings down to the point of how the processes change and how the mindset and the cultural shift happens. The point was that if the engineers or the operators or the operations engineers are going to look at predictions, what are they supposed to do if they see something is going to happen, say 8 hours from now? What is the standard procedure to be followed? What is the SOP to be followed? Because right now, more or less, the entire ITIL is based on mostly around change and incident management, which is right. But the problem management is very, very, very reactive. And we wanted to bring that to proactiveness. So if my prediction says that something is going to go wrong in 8 to 10 hours from now, what will be the next step? And that is where the SRE kicks in. This is how we, in our organization, tried to use the site reliability engineering. Is we want to run a project which is at 75% of the time where the prediction shows that it will go wrong. Okay, and that project is led and executed by the site reliability engineer and ensure that the trend starts going down. And that can only be done when we have log-based predictions. We take it seriously and we have great accuracy in that, for which the organizations need to invest on data science to ensure that we get to that level. The other part was about change management on an application side, which we had, where we put in a concept called as failure budget, where we gave my individual budget based on the historic data for each and every team and how they have been performing with the changes. And based on that, we gave them some credits, and those credits would exhaust if they breach the error budgets or the SLOs which we have defined. Till they are not, they are free to get through all the caps and all the quality gates. The moment they breach it once or twice, they're back to the quality gates. So that's how we try to inculcate the risk-taking ability in the organization on all the teams. As I said, SRE is a more cultural and data shift rather than actually a technology shift, which is a big I should say, a misconception. And also, when you dig deep, you'll see that automation is just the final thing. It is not the driver. It is what you do at the end. The drivers are all of this which we talked about. Very quickly, to go with challenges, there were plenty. Transformations are always challenging. We know that. So one of the most important thing was people tend to use this transformation to attain numbers. Yes, it will give it, but in the long run, the ROI is in the long run. We don't get instant gratification, right? Cannot have too much of heavy duty governance, which will become an issue. Inculcating the cultural, the wheel will only turn when you start looking at the culture of failure rather than consequence management, where something goes wrong, then you look at who is the culprit and try to have consequences for that. The consequence management is not going to work. You have to inculcate the culture of failure. Non-technology centric approach, people tend to start working everything on an Excel. That doesn't work. And we should be able to take bold decisions. It's a changing time. The industry is changing, and it's time that at some point of time we have to take some bold decisions. And the final thing is, we have to take error budget concept seriously. It's like the smartwatch which you wear. You wear the smartwatch, you run every day, you look at the numbers. And why do you look at the numbers? To see how you have improved. Error budget is exactly the same. You see how you want to improve. and it has to be taken very seriously. It is one of the key ingredients of site reliability engineering. Having said that, here are my blogs and my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect, and the blog is all about site reliability engineering. That's where the framework I have put in. How did we come to an error budget concept, which can be a separate topic. So that's all I had. Thanks a lot for your time and patience in hearing me out.